Okay, so today I wanted to talk about the history of sports data analytics. And so the reason I picked this topic is because to me, it was important to understand where we've come from, what's been done before. And this was actually kind of fun to put together to see, what's been done in the past and how it's evolved over time and where we're at today. So I'll end the presentation giving a little bit about, current status quo of sports data analytics and where we're at. To preface this, I'm not a subject matter expert at this. I did my own research to put this presentation together. So if anybody wants to chime in, add anything, happy to hear it, and any input is welcome. So my name's Avi. I'm a Pisces gang. My favorite sports are the Rockets, any team that LeBron James is playing for, the Texans. And I also wanted to throw this one in there because I thought it was kind of interesting as we kind of talk about sports data analytics today. And I really enjoy individual sports as well. Tennis, running, golf, cycling. I know Kate's a swimmer, so swimming, things like that. I think there's a lot of kind of cool analytics that are being done in individual sports as well. You can find me on Twitter at Felice Avinash, and I have a GitHub that I barely do anything, but I try to push a little bit of code here and there. So let's get into it. If anybody wants to guess, what is kind of the first sport that started recording statistics and data analytics? Anybody have any guesses out there?
I'm going to go with baseball.
I have a feeling it's going to go way back. Oh, man. Okay.
You are correct. So the first documented statistics for sports was by Henry Chadwick, and it is in a book called Beatles Dime Baseball Player. So this is an exact quote from Henry Chadwick. He said, "In order to obtain an accurate estimate of a player's skill, an analysis both of his play at the bat and in the field should be made, inclusive of the way in which he was put out," which I assume means he was struck out or pitch was caught or something like that. So that is an exact quote for him. I looked up if I could see if there was a copy selling, and eBay is currently auctioning books off, originals for the price of $350 to $500. And Chadwick's goal in this was to create a notation system within baseball to kind of refer back and people can kind of see how people are performing. So the earliest documented sports statistics was starting in 1861. And then, surprisingly enough, there was, through the New York Times, there was a reporter that decided he wanted to track tennis statistics. So he started documenting aces off players, where the ball was kind of placed, hits off of opponents, double faults, total points won. And he submitted this into the New York Times anonymously, and they started publishing tennis stats, which I found interesting as well. And for me, the assumption also was a lot of the other sports that we commonly know today weren't really around back then as well. So in 1891, tennis stats were starting to be published. Kate, are you there?
Yep.
I think you'll find this one interesting, and I did some research, and it across a variety of sources, it proved to be true. But this one was a double whammy, and I found this one pretty cool. So it was the boxing match between Corbett versus Simmons in 1897. And this was they actually filmed it and produced it, and it is known as the first feature film. I don't know if you can confirm or deny that, Kate, but.
No, I don't think so. But maybe the first feature film with sports, but there were quite a few. There's actually an argument between like Thomas Edison and some guy that disappeared because they said that it's like a conspiracy theory about he created the feature film sorts. So I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah, I was suspicious of it too. I was very suspicious because I was like, before this, there must have been something. So I actually watched some of the film that they produced as well. Super interesting. It's just a boxing match for like over 100 minutes of film.
Those outfits are pretty spectacular too on them.
Yeah, yes,
Really
definitely
appreciate
dates.
that for the ladies.
Yeah, it almost looks like a drawing and not even like a real photograph. But double as well was the first time that a heat map was used. So James Conner is famous for producing the first heat map, and what he did was he drew body diagrams and actually found the body diagrams that he had, and he showed punches as to where the pictorially where the punches were thrown on there, and he used large sheets of paper to draw these out, and then ended up publishing it as well. So I thought this was an interesting one to show the first kind of how the progression of heat maps. And then we get into what we today know as football. So gridiron stats started coming around, and the first statistics from gridiron was actually through the NCAA at the Yale versus Princeton. And I actually found the stats that are presented there. So I was recording touchdowns. It was a comprehensive list, and it showed a lot of key events. You know, it was the first time that they started estimating distances for rushing yards, punts, how many punts were being made, and just a variety of stats and what they called gridiron back then. I found that guy's picture kind of funny, but that's Seymour Seawoff, and he actually passed away last year, but he owned the company Elias Sports Bureau in what is today known as the first sports data company that was ever founded, and it was founded in 1913. So I have quite a bit of history here, but I'll shorten it for you for a bit. So it started with two brothers named Al and Walter, and they started a company in New York City, and what they started doing was printing off, as expected, baseball baseball scorecards. So they started printing these off and then directly selling these to fans, and actually started a company out of this. So later, both of the brothers passed away, and this gentleman here, that's pictured, Mr. Seawoff, he bought Elias Sports Bureau from the widows of both the brothers, and he led the company for over 60 years. So he actually just passed away last year. So he is kind of one of the fathers of modern day sports data science as well. And he got the company off to a slow start initially, but his big thing was he wanted to branch out beyond baseball and started with MLB, and then he did the NFL, NBA, NHL, MLS, WNBA, and he started producing these to different telecasts and partnering with ESPN, CBS Sports, and providing a lot of this data to them in order for them to broadcast these stats. So the company is still around, still kicking, and they still provide a lot of stats. I would recommend following them on Twitter as well. They have a pretty good Twitter presence in which they tweet a lot of their sports data as well. So I found this to be fascinating. They are known as one of the first sports data company, and were established a long time ago and have developed quite a bit into our modern day technology as well. All right, this next one, I am upset at this one. This one I'm upset about. So the story goes is that there was a gentleman named Salam Qureshi, and he grew up in India. Apparently he knew nothing about football and nothing about America as well. But he came over, and he was a computer programmer and a statistician, and he helped the Cowboys, and apparently the Cowboys started having a lot of hunches in their back office about players and stats and stuff like that. And he really helped make a lot of these stats into more concrete data that they could really analyze and sit and look at. And since they brought him on, they've made 5 Super Bowls and 2 titles. And this is where I get a little upset, is that ESPN and 538 produce a movie called The Cowboys and the Indian, which he's not even Native American, he's Indian. And they ended up publishing that, and it showcased how somebody who doesn't even have a background in the sport can come in and just have a basic understanding of data and statistics and still provide concrete proof that sports data analytics works. You know, we can look and.
Is this the first known use of Indian on ESPN? Accurate? Because most of the time it has to do with Cleveland, which wrong Indian.
Right. Yes. Yeah. That was another big one. Yeah.
So we should recognize ESPN for being accurate.
This isn't accurate though. This is because this is the Cowboys and the Indian, right? Meaning
What?
like a Native American, but this guy was Indian.
No, that's right though. The Cowboys was the team and he was Indian. So
I guess it makes sense.
It's right.
But typically the expression, right, is Cowboys and Indians referring to Native Americans. But yes, they at least refer to him as Indian. So
I think I could agree with you if it said the Cowboys and like the Pakistani, because that would be obviously wrong. But I mean, would you appreciate it more if it was the Indian and the Cowboys to just not go off the playoff words?
I guess so. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. You want to be first.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay.
Yes. Because yes, exactly. Especially since it's the Cowboys, you know, right?
Go Cowboys.
So that one was funny. This one I threw in there because I actually thought it was something that I'd like us as a group to kind of pursue as well. And something that I'm always fascinated by in sports is the clutch factor, right? And I think something that we all fall in love with sports is those clutch moments and clutch players and what really defines clutch. So here's a quick story so it was two brothers and they rented an IBM mainframe to do their stats for baseball. And this is a quote that actually came from the book. If anybody wants to read the book, this is actually, I found a full published version of it. University of Tennessee actually took it and published it on the internet. So if anybody's interested in reading it, I browsed through it and it's actually fascinating. But this is one quote in there that I think we can all relate to. And it says, "The underlying theme of what has been said so far is that big clutch plays involve not only what happened, but equally important when," right? So I think, you know, as the clock winds down, bottom of the ninth inning, you know, those moments that in sports that we really love and, you know, jump out of our seats for is some of the reasons that I fell in love with sports as well. So it's really defining what does it mean to be a clutch player, and, you know, that it's almost a sixth sense for people to draft people or for people to bring somebody onto a team that has this clutch skill. So it's something that I would like us to kind of put some stats around and things like that as well. But I like that it says it's not only what happened, but when. I think timing is a lot of what measures clutch in here. And I had to throw in a picture of my boy Clutch. So that's in there as well. So in 2003, we're all familiar with this one, I assume. So in 2003, Michael Lewis published a book called Moneyball. It was for the Oakland Athletics. And this was something that's always cool, right? Because in sports, we have a lot of small market teams, right? Example, the Oakland A's. So it's how in a small market team do you utilize your budget to the best of your ability, right? So how do we take a small amount of money to draft people that are kind of overlooked, not seen as star players, but have some abilities that are looked for on the team. So published the book, and there was the general manager, Billy Beane, as we're all familiar with. And their focus was really on the analytical, evidence-based approach to assembling a competitive baseball team. So again, it was given that they were a small market team, they wanted to have a competitive advantage, and they brought on stats into there. And finally, this is our present day modern sports data analytics. So when I was looking through this, I think the biggest thing that I think was emerging is the emergence of video. I think this was, to me, the biggest gap that's been filled. It's the emergence of video on top of the fact that it's the emergence of so many more sports that are being analyzed. And for that reason, I even put a picture of a guy doing a squat, right? So there's this company, My Dartfish, and if you look at their website, it's insane how many sports they analyze. They analyze gymnastics, just every sport with video. And I think it is this emergence of video that allows us to get more granular with our data and to be able to get more insights out of what's happening for players, for coaches, and for managers and everything else. So this one was a cool one. The Pitch FX one is another big one for baseball. And we at Clutch Sports are using Synergy to track a lot of our data. So, but to me, I really wanted to emphasize that as I was doing research on modern day sports data analytics, I found that video has really changed the game, and being able to break down video and film has really changed how players play, how to avoid injuries. You know, they're even going back and looking at certain injuries and analyzing how to avoid them in the future. So I think, to me, the biggest play was the emergence of video. So that is actually all that I had. If there's anybody that would like to chime in, jump in with any comments, questions, comments.
That's cool.
critiques.
You should download that PDF of that book and throw it in the Google Drive so we can all check it
yeah,
out.
absolutely. Yeah. I'm surprised that they even had it, because a lot of the other things that, well, I'm actually not surprised, because even on the other things, like even finding that boxing video was very easy, or finding a copy of, Beatles book was pretty easy. So I think that people want, like, as historians, to track how sports is being published, and especially on the stats. I think, I'm not going to lie though, man, there's always been a huge bias towards baseball, right? I think there's just because the number of stats, the history of the sport, how long it's been around, the money involved with it, things like that, there is a lot of bias towards baseball, which I think is really cool. But yeah, definitely I'll throw that in there, Blake.
Yeah, I think baseball too, to what you're saying, is it's the easiest to track because it's kind of like a turn-based sport, if you think about it. Whereas football, you have 22 people moving simultaneously, so it's a lot harder to track. And then soccer, you have no stoppages essentially. So baseball just has natural breaks, and then of course the batting statistics. That's like, who is not going to keep track of that from the start?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, and baseball's still like matchup oriented too, because it's like there's everything else you can assume on the field is going to sort of remain the same outside of like pitcher batter matchup. So
have you guys heard of this Dartfish thing? I was actually very intrigued. If y'all could just Google it. I mean, they have some really cool, even like promo videos of what they do and stuff. I mean, the amount of sports that these guys analyze is bananas. Like fishing, bow and arrow, like archery, just all sports that, I guess there's a market for it though, at the end of it. I don't know about esports. Actually, that's a great question, Blake. I've not checked out esports. I didn't actually. That's actually a really good question. Esports and sports betting, I didn't really find too much history on, but I guess for that matter, right, it's pretty modern as well. But
yeah, I thought it was interesting too. Like you're talking about, I think his name was like Qureshi, the guy that was helping the Cowboys in the '60s or whatever. I mean, even like for what we're doing, I mean, there's going to be so many times where we're probably going to go in and objectively like know less about a team, or potentially even a sport, relative to like the coaches that are actually there day in and day out, but still showing that there's like, a long history of people being able to come in and just kind of provide an objective perspective and to be able to enhance like a coach's ability to analyze his own team, just purely knowing the data side, not even necessarily the sports side. Obviously we want to be able to know both, but it's cool to see that there's a long-standing history of that.
I think that was the same story with Moneyball, to be honest. The more I read about that too, right, it's the objectiveness, right? And like, I think the media creates a lot of hype around players, and especially these days with like, I mean, high school players being all over social media, and then that hype's created where a lot of the like foundational, like this guy provides defense to a team. Like nobody's putting videos up online about a guy playing great defense, right? Like occasionally, well, but like hustle defense, something like that, right? So I think even with Moneyball, those are some things that I was learning as well, is the objective side of just what is that ESPN show? Like Numbers Don't Lie, right? Things like that
Yeah.
that are cool to look at.
Yeah, definitely.
So.
I totally agree.
What
Cool, guys.
have you seen that have to do with like more like the predictive side? I feel like a lot of sports analytics are like, now that something has happened, we now know what the odds were of that happening, rather than necessarily like a machine learning kind of side. Have you seen anything around that?
I think that's a great question, Kate. I think it's something that I would say maybe is more recent as well, but I'll definitely write that one down, because that's something that I want to look at as well as predictives, especially with recruiting and, you know, drafting, things like that are like, I want to see the history of that. So I think that's a great perspective that I didn't think about is predictive analytics on sports. So I'm going to write that one down to look into as well.
Yeah, there was I forget the name of the company, but there was a guy that that I had met that works for, they do a lot of like NFL kind of advisory work, especially, and they've got this whole like predictive analytic model. I mean, it's basically just like sort of neural network, and they're focused on football. And if you've noticed this year in the NFL, like there's been tons of teams that are going for it on fourth down, and that isn't really
unless you're the Chargers.
Yeah, and this guy, you know, his company's working with, I want to say when I spoke to him at the time, it was like 12 different teams. They'd worked with the Eagles and Doug Peterson that year that they won the Super Bowl with Foles. And if you remember, they were known for super aggressive play calling that year. But the model that they used was kind of sort of what you're talking about, where it was all about like predictive analytics and then outcomes. So like they would calculate an expected like final score every single play based on this model. And they found that the largest gap between like coaches' intuition and the data was going for it on fourth down. And their model would say that you should go for it on fourth down, you know, anytime it's like a fourth and under 5 and you're past your own 30, you should go for it, which was not common wisdom, right? And now if you know, watching NFL week in and week out, just these first few weeks, I mean, there are tons of teams that are going for it in much riskier situations. So I think that is like a model generally, you know, Kate, that is applied. It's just a matter of the method.
It's certainly like different sports taking it like or adapting to it quicker. Like we said, baseball definitely has been addressing statistics since whenever you said like early 1900s, since it started. But what they're doing is they're predicting pitches based on pitch count and stuff like that. So they do it a lot easier than football. What I'm interested in thinking, like if you could predict like, all right, you know, we trot out a 3 wide with a running back and shotgun, you know, what is their go-to or something like that, some kind of predictive analysis from that, where I think that might be useful and interesting to look at.
Yeah. Well, especially because football is such like a strategic game and like a before the snap, you know, kind of game.
Matchup based.
Yeah, it would be interesting, especially if you could have like a model that sort of had a game theory aspect to it, you know, where like if I show 3 wide and running back 1 tight end, then the defense is going to assume XYZ about me. Now they're going to make a certain decision. How do I adjust to that decision? And then assuming that they have knowledge of that, how do they, you know what I mean? It becomes just it becomes this kind of like iterative.
That's exactly what happened in my brain.
It's chess, right? Yeah.
That's what happened in my brain when Kate brought it up. It just immediately like broke and stop.
Well, it's like also just something you know about statistics is like statistics for the most part, you're trying to predict if you could have predicted something from occurring, not necessarily like what is the future, because that is usually what you are hoping to improve your ability to do that, but not necessarily do anything besides evaluate previous statistics. So.
Yeah.
Hey, Kate, one thing I wanted to ask you actually was when you were swimming, did they provide any stats? Like, I was also very curious about these individual sports. How do they treat stats for swimming? Let's say.
I mean, you do it more yourself, to be honest, than like along those lines. Like, I had one swim coach who, like, kind of because you don't have a stopwatch on you while you're swimming, like, really, you can't really look. Sometimes you can look backstroke, but for the most part, you're kind of just hoping you feel the right feel. And so you train yourself so much for 2 hours a day or 4 hours a day for a 2-minute long race, hoping that you know what it should feel like to go that fast. I'd say that like my family, when I was recruited for swimming and all that stuff, we did track that kind of stuff just so I kind of have a general idea where I would perform compared to like the people I'd be swimming with. And so like that was something I looked at personally, but it doesn't necessarily mean that like I probably, no offense to Rice, went to the best swimming school, because my sister went to University of Georgia and won a national championship, and I won a Conference USA championship. Like kind of not the same thing. So where she was training with Olympians and I was training with people. So it was kind of just like, I think that's kind of the thing where it's like I might have actually shot myself in the foot by going to that school thinking I would be a top performer, rather than going to a school where maybe I would have been challenged more by peers. No offense to everyone I swam with. You're great people, but
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's surprising. I don't know. I figured maybe you would like keep track of every lap or something like that. And maybe you try some stuff different and then you do a T-test, or like, okay, yeah, I don't know, maybe going for these longer reaches or something like that. I have a 5-second cutoff or something, it's statistically significant.
So there is, so if you've ever watched swimming, you'll see on the lane line, there's like a one lane line that's a different color. And that's actually because of a guy named Dave Burkhoff. And Dave Burkhoff was a backstroker from Montana. And he went to the Olympics, and his skill was underwater kicking. And so he actually figured out that he could swim faster by being underwater, and he could like plug his nose with his lip. And so he actually he kicked so far underwater compared to competitors that he was so much further ahead that they actually changed the rules of swimming to only allow you a certain distance of kicking underwater.
I had no clue about that.
Yep. So they do track some stuff, but at the same, and I mean, the biggest thing in swimming is swimsuit technology, right? Like, because buoyancy became such a huge thing with these swimsuits that like the Torpedo Ian Thorpe wore in 2004. And like they got to the point where the suits were too much of an advantage. Now they still allow people to use similar suits in like triathlon. So it's interesting. It's just kind of a difference between two different sports, but yeah, swimming.
That's crazy. Also, please share a picture if you have one or can find one of plugging your nose with your lips.
I know that's
that's all I'm trying to picture is like, how does that happen?
I wore a nose plug, but because backstroke, but other people can actually do that. It's a genetic advantage.
That's incredible.
Yep.
Nice, dudes. Well, that's all I had. If there's nothing else, Omar, you've been quiet. Oh, Brian's on the call too. What's up, Brian?
Elin.
Yeah, what's up, guys? Sorry, I'm like half at work, but
no, you're good. You're good.
Yeah,
I see you there until just now.
Sure.
So,
the other one you didn't hit on this. I was just gonna mention sports marketing also has a lot of data stuff now too, like
interesting
sponsorship stuff. I saw like some company that does like a platform for like trying to match up sponsorships, like with the right sponsor opportunities. I imagine based on like demographics and a lot of other things.
Omar, if you're interested in that, the buddy with the 10 Bay Lightning, that's the kind of stuff he does. I can hook you up and talk to him if you want.
Wait, give me an example. Give me an example.
Oh, what? I'm just looking like I was looking at a company called Sponsor United, and that's what they do. They like have some sort of platform with some sort of like basic, I'm sure, like machine learning that's supposed to tie you to the right opportunities. I guess. I imagine that's probably tied to the right audience, viewership, a lot of different, depending what you're looking at or what you're targeting. But it's no different. Business does it, right? I mean, business does it. Yeah. It's no different than
it's customer profiling.
It's profiling, but it's specific to like the industry. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I've thought about that at least for like when you think about salary cap and stuff, right? Well, a player might be a high cost, but they also might be like a high risk when it comes to social media or how they like engage with people. I think like Antonio Brown probably would have been like a high risk when it came to social media or like marketing, but the Raiders took a risk on him and so did the Patriots and ended up shooting themselves in the foot basically. So I totally think that that's a huge area for improvement at least.
That's
yeah. The others, the off-field data analytics, right? Yeah,
that's a perfect example. Yeah, getting into Twitter sentiment analysis.
Oh yeah, I know. Social media has changed the game with all that too, right? Yeah, cool, Omar. Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think that there are things besides just on-ball stats that are important.
Also, another book, Smart Baseball, is another book that came out that's kind of like pretty good.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah,
There were literally in between. I found kind of the ones that I thought were most interesting. There were in between each of these events, there were 5 or 6 other really big highlighted things. I'm happy to share those as well. But
Yeah, I
these are
think you
the
should do
ones
a
that I
part
thought.
2. You should do a
That'd
part
be
2
cool.
to
Yeah, that'd be
further
cool.
on, get a little more in depth to maybe
Yeah.
one of the aspects, whether it's
Yeah.
specifically baseball or something like that.
Cool. Yeah. No, I think that to me, the predictive analytics was a really good question. I think I'd like to dig deeper into the history of that with machine learning and everything too. I actually want to dig deeper into like how video started emerging, things like that. And then, yeah, I could do a part 2. I'm fascinated to do this research as well. So cool, guys.
Definitely. Appreciate you presenting, Avi.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Anything
Tough, man.
else?
Great job.
All right. Thanks, guys, for showing
Golf
up.
clap.
Bye.
Week 3, babies. Week 3. All right. Bye, guys.
Love you all.
Hey,
Peace.
man.